Courtney, welcome to KubeFM. So first things first, who are you, what's your role, and where do you work?
My name is Cortney Nickerson. I am head of community for Nirmata, the creators of the Kyberno project, which is incubating on the CNCF landscape.
You've had quite a journey, from political science and a philosophy degree, as well as playing softball in university, to becoming a CNCF ambassador and head of community at Nirmata. How did you first discover Kubernetes? When did it first come on your radar?
I first discovered Kubernetes at the same time I discovered tech in general. I had joined a startup here in the city that I live in northern Spain that was an application for web application security. And they had a lot of customers that were adopting Kubernetes at the time. So this is a handful of years ago. And that's actually how I discovered that Kubernetes existed at all. The rest of my experience with Kubernetes since then came from just being curious to actually be able to understand what our customers needed at that time, and then having the opportunity to join a tech community, which was Data on Kubernetes community at the time. I know you're familiar with it. They needed somebody to write a newsletter and do a handful of things. And so it was a path to learning Kubernetes for me, was actually being involved in a community that was Kubernetes focused and doing something in the background, like writing their monthly newsletter.
And what was the first contact like, though? Just walk me through it. Like, when you first heard about this technology, someone explained it to you. Did it make sense the first time, or what was the sort of, learning curve regarding that?
It made no sense at all whatsoever for probably a good 6 months. And every time I think it makes sense now, I discover that there's something else that comes up to make me realize that it still doesn't always make sense to me. It's such a complex environment. And so at least for me, the first 6 months were just trying to understand what the difference was between a cluster and a pod and a resource and what that even meant. Understand what YAML was, try to figure out all the different components of those things. So it was very much being thrown into the deep end of something that made no sense at all. And people kept explaining it to me in very technical ways. I think that's one thing that is not done especially well in this space is technical documentation for newbies. Everyone always writes from an intermediate standpoint. So my initial introduction was quite bumpy and oftentimes still is. My journey has not been a straight line by any means.
And now, as someone who leads the Kyberno community and speaks at major events like KubeCon, how do you stay up to date with the rapidly evolving cloud native ecosystem? What resources work best for you?
Very good question. My best and number one resource is actually Jim Bourgeois, our CEO. I have no idea how that man can stay on top of so many things. He shares a huge amount of resources with our team all the time. Outside of that, I do spend a lot of time on LinkedIn following people like James Spurrin. He always has updates about different things in Kubernetes. I do try to figure out who's on a Kubernetes release team shadow, because those folks are learning as well. And oftentimes their posts are super, super informative because they are more explanatory as they're moving along forward in their journey. Kubernetes newsletters as well. CNCF Slack has a lot of different channels where you can ask questions, but I think my biggest resource for learning is really pulling from community and not being afraid to just ask people for help.
And of course, KubeFM. But next question. So you are described in your LinkedIn profile as being a jacklet of all trades. And I must admit, that's the first time I've heard that expression. And someone who thrives in startup environments. Tell me more about that.
This is a phrase that has been thrown at me, kind of a label that was given to me instead of a jack of all trades, trying to be inclusive and calling me a Jacqueline of all trades. And it's very much because at this stage, I'm more of a generalist since I am not technically backgrounded previously. Everything I've learned has been very much a self-learning process. And it's impossible, at least for me, to focus on one specific thing. I find everything that's going on to be incredibly interesting and oftentimes necessary for me to have a basic understanding for the different jobs that I've done. So when I started off in the cloud native space professionally, there was a component of writing a newsletter about an array of different people and speakers with different backgrounds. So I started to just do deep dives into each one of those different backgrounds to understand what they were doing. Then moving into developer relations role also oftentimes leaves you in a situation where you're demoing or working with people to give talks about technologies that you probably don't use all the time, but that it's good to know about. And I personally love having a generalist take on things or having an idea of what's going on. So that's probably where it comes from. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in anything at all whatsoever, not even in myself a lot of times, but I do try to at least have a broad understanding and grasp of what's going on around me.
With that in mind, something that's spoken about a lot in our ecosystem is imposter syndrome. I know you spoke previously about the lack of beginner-friendly documentation, but you coming from the background that you came from, and you find yourself working at a Kubernetes startup, doing developer relations, and doing demos in an environment like KubeCon, where people with very technical profiles are going to come up and ask for help. Who was instrumental for you in the early days to get you to that point, or what was it that you used in order to frame your understanding of Kubernetes and what's going to be going under the hood to be able to empathize with those end users and to understand the problems that they're facing? What was that process like for you? And if perhaps if you'd like to mention anyone that helped you get started there.
Yeah, I have endless gratitude in terms of my beginnings from two specific people. It's James Spurrin and Siam Pathak. And to be completely honest, the first time I saw them at a KubeCon, I fangirled. Their introductory courses and YouTube content for Kubernetes 101 was instrumental in me wrapping my head around anything that was going on in this space. And they are so open to answering questions, especially from people who are coming from other backgrounds and moving into this space, that they were instrumental in my movement forward in the Kubernetes community. And then secondly, Brad McCoy, this man told me I should give a talk, and I thought that was absolutely ridiculous. And then he just signed me up to give one, and I found out when the acceptance guy came into my inbox, and then he just kind of forced me forward to do it. He didn't give me any information to be able to reject it, and he threw me into the deep end that I would not have gone into anytime soon because he knew that I was ready long before I did. And I will always be grateful to that.
And could you share what the talk was about?
Yes, my first talk was at KCD Pakistan, actually. And the talk was about Backstage. It was just coming onto the scene. And so the whole point was everybody was beginners in it. And so I had to learn Backstage and gave an intro to Backstage talk to a lot of people that were just being introduced to Backstage. It was a fantastic experience.
Now, you speak about Kubernetes every single day and to lots of different audiences. When you're speaking about it, what's your elevator pitch to people when they say, what is Kubernetes?
I do have an elevator pitch because it took quite some time. I really wanted my family to understand what I was working in. And nobody in my family is technically backgrounded. And so this is, a lot of iterations of trying to figure out how to explain it to them. And what I've come up with at this point is very much Kubernetes is like a head chef in a kitchen. So your kitchen or your cluster, it's your cluster. It's got different machines that are running. And Kubernetes is a chef that makes sure that all of those things run smoothly and make sure that the recipes are being followed, which are your configurations, to ensure that your customers, the people who are dining in your restaurant, get their meals prepared appropriately. And those are your applications that get delivered. This has been a good 3 or 4 years of coming up with this, but I find that most people at least get the idea of what it's supposed to be.
Now let's move on to the core questions. So with these as well, to remember, just think of concrete points that you really want to address for each one. Now, so you went from sales and marketing roles to becoming a respected voice in the Kubernetes ecosystem without being a maintainer. What's your playbook for folks out there who are thinking about building credibility in this very technical community?
Step number 1, be vulnerable. Tell people you don't know. The best thing you can do is find an expert and tell them you don't know, because they can explain it to you in terms that you will understand, and then build from there. But also, before you ask that expert, do a little bit of background and tell them anything that did make sense so that they can see that you made the effort. I think 100% in this space, things are based on effort. Make effort consistently, make it daily, tell people the effort that you're making, and be clear about what it is that you want or need to learn. And the people around you will very much help you get there.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? In terms of effort, consistency, discipline, coming from a background, you played softball in university. Maybe could you talk about how that has helped you shape, all right, setting, challenges and working towards a goal, organizing things to be delivered in a, piece by piece manner. And once again, really having that discipline. I think a lot of people might not see the crossover there, but I think it's quite clear. What do you think about that?
There's definitely a crossover. There are quite a few other athletes in this space that I've discovered have come from non-technical backgrounds as well. And we've very much followed the same playbook here. Abby Bankser is one of them, which is always interesting to talk to her about her experience as an athlete. But a good amount of it is figuring out what your end goal is, setting up a schedule for training or studying or reviewing or reading or whatever it is that you're going to be doing that's actually attainable, that you can sustain over a period of time. Smaller goals, the better. Sometimes it's slow and steady usually wins the race, not so much trying to shove it all in at one time. There's a lot of muscle memory that goes into everything, including tech. And then outside of that, I think there's just a certain amount of mindset of making a decision that you're going to do it. That's it. So reminding yourself daily that you're capable of doing hard things. The more you believe that you're capable of doing hard things, the more capable you will be of doing them, and you'll eventually be able to do that. If I can figure out how to set up a kind cluster and put an application in it, anyone can. That's just, you just decide that you can do hard things and you will.
And another follow-up question too is that, having a background also on the sales side of things, I think, oftentimes sales might be seen as, the I don't know, I don't want to say the enemy or the villain of the story, but at the end of the day, for anybody to have a job, something has to be sold. Could you maybe speak to the fact that while we work in a very, very technical space, at the end of the day, if these technologies don't provide business value and aren't, helping customers solve their problems, they're probably not going to get very far. Can you tell me about the relevance of having that experience in the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think sales is very frowned upon by most people in tech, especially our end user community. And that's really unfortunate for a couple of reasons. One, salespeople are also very gritty and rigorous and disciplined. If they are good at their trade, most people in sales really do care about helping people. And so when they get on a call, if they don't understand your use case, it's not for lack of trying, or maybe it's something new that they've never heard of. So a little bit of patience and guidance, they will oftentimes tell you, oh, this tool is not for you. I'm so sorry I took up some of your time. But on the other side of that, none of us are going to actually be able to pay our own bills if our sales teams aren't successful, especially on the side where we're building technology for technologists to use. We need to understand that the technologist, you're not going to be as successful if you don't have the tools that you need. You probably won't discover the tools that you need or that would be most advantageous to you without an explanation from somebody who is aware of what your general pains are, or at least is trying to understand them. And then the third point is about platform engineering. Here we are sitting in a space constantly talking about platform engineering, and platform engineers talking about serving their customer, and their customer being their dev team. But how can you actually do that? Be a good customer and give good customer service if you don't know anything about sales? Right? Oftentimes you're selling your platform, or you are doing customer service and hearing what they need, and then you're providing a product that does that. And salespeople oftentimes do that with their product team. They go talk to people and they say, what we're selling isn't actually what people need. They need this other thing, and a product evolves and develops. The same thing happens in your web applications. The same thing happens in the services you provide. So I think oftentimes there are many things that people can learn from sales professionals and apply them into the world of software and Kubernetes.
Now, you've been a track chair for the Cloud Native Novice track in KubeCon. You're a CNCF ambassador. You're also one of the co-organizers of our local chapter here for CNCF Bilbao, and speaking at multiple events all over the world. So for people out there who are trying to break into this ecosystem, what actually moves the needle? What actually will, get people ahead? Is it certifications, conference talks, or perhaps something else? What makes the difference in terms of, the contributions that are really going to move people forward?
Great question. I think the level of impact that your contributions have very much depend on what your end goal is. So in my case, I've always wanted to be more involved in developer relations, community-oriented things. And so I've very much taken a track of being involved in community, giving back time by doing things like serving as a track chair or reviewing CFPs in order to learn more and provide a good track schedule for people based on what I hear people saying that they're interested in. I also dedicate time to our meetup group because I enjoy connecting with different people and learning about what their interests are and their challenges are. But for somebody who's looking to move from a developer role into an operations role, for example, they might need to be spending a lot more time on GitHub and giving different types of contributions that are more technically based, or building out tutorials, sharing other types of content. Certifications, I think, are great, especially for understanding global concepts of things. But also there is a tendency of people to think that a certification doesn't actually make you capable of doing things, right? And so making a point of any certification that you do finish or complete or that you're working on goes in line with some sort of project that you're then going to put it into practice so people can see that not only do you understand the concept, but you can apply it also. And I think that last point in particular, no matter what route you take in terms of combining different types of contributions, is the most important. Make sure that whatever it is that you're learning or doing, you can then apply to some specific project. So if I'm reviewing talks, why am I doing this? And how does this apply to the community space that I want to be in? If I'm doing contributions to a project, why did I pick this project? And how does it apply to the actual job that I'm doing now or the job that I want in the future? Always thinking about your next step, you'll eventually build the castle that you want.
And with that in mind too, given your experience, sometimes it's tough for folks out there thinking about, there are a lot of things that I haven't done, but how do you correctly package the things that you have done, whether it's been in technical marketing or community leadership, DevRel, et cetera, areas sometimes where it's not necessarily one concrete thing, as you'll find it in other areas that are more focused on hard skills. So how should people package their Kubernetes work in order to catch a hiring manager's attention? At the end of the day, people really want to work in this ecosystem. It's very competitive. Jobs, go up and down. These are things that we track in through Cube Careers. But what would your advice be for people that are out there trying to think about, okay, how do I make my skills visible? How do I combine them so that I can catch the hiring manager's attention and get that job that I'm trying to get?
Of course. I think one thing you can do is talk to your sales and marketing team or anyone doing sales and marketing around you. They're used to packaging things to make sure that the best parts stand out. To interview somebody who would be in a role similar to what your future manager is in. So if you want to be an SRE, you find somebody who manages a team of SREs and you ask them for a coffee chat and interview them about what are the skills that stick out to you? What do you say that you're looking for? How does somebody demonstrate these things? Those are the people that know what they want and they know the type of profile that they're looking for. And the more you can interview them and have an understanding of what it is that they're looking for, the easier it will be for you to package then your capacities to make sure that you find a good fit, not just for you, but also for the people who are hiring you. So those are the two things that I would say. I always ask my sales and marketing friends, what sticks out to you here? And if they don't give me the answer of what I'm hoping to hear in terms of where I'm hoping to draw their attention, then I know that I need to make some adjustments. And then always interviewing or asking somebody who has the same profile of what you hope your future manager has about the skill set that's necessary will then help you figure out what your path is. If you're missing something, what your path is to attain that skill set. And if you have everything necessary, then how you need to actually present it in their words so that it grabs their attention.
You're active in organizing KCDs in different countries, running newsletters, building communities. What are the underrated activities? We often talk maybe about chop wood, carry water, but what are the underrated activities that actually accelerate someone's Kubernetes career?
I'm not really sure. I think it's different for everyone. In my case, the biggest activity that's accelerated my career is networking. 100% networking has been what has accelerated my career, and networking on various levels. So not just networking to meet somebody and name drop them. Networking in terms of, hi, I see you're involved in this. I'm very interested in this specific part of what it is that you do. Can you share some of your expertise with me? Networking in terms of when you go to a conference, being willing to walk up to somebody and say, hey, your talk was great. Can you tell me more? I have questions about. Networking in terms of just following people on LinkedIn. Don't send the connection request if you don't know them, but follow them. Follow their content if it's something that's come up on your feed that looks interesting, and give them comments, give them questions. I think the more proactive you are about networking with people, both in terms of getting to know them, but also letting them get to know you, is probably the fastest way to move yourself forward, especially in terms of what you need to learn and where things are going in the industry, so that you're in the right place at the right time.
And with that in mind too, in terms of building a network, we live in a very fast-paced world, and things can often be based just on, on image or looks, or trying to generate, reactions through likes or things like that in social media. But what's the difference between just having followers versus earning genuine respect in this ecosystem? How do you measure that?
I think there's a massive difference between having followers and actually being respected. One of the best examples of this would be Victor Farsick. Victor Farsick works insanely hard at understanding technologies, the community that he's working with, how things are built by different people in different places. And he forms his own solid opinion based on that. And he shares it with the world. And he does not care if people agree or if they disagree, and he welcomes both. That in and of itself, of just being able to say, look, my knowledge level might be a 3 on a scale of 30, or it might be a 35 on the scale of 30, but I have a solid opinion about what it is that I do know. It makes a world of difference in terms of people respecting you as a person and not just following you to follow because you got your nails done and took a nice picture with your cat. Those things they're very real. Also, as talking about imposter syndrome earlier, being a woman in this space, there's always this question when you're speaking, am I the diversity speaker? Am I the one giving the percentage here? But in order to combat that, I think the best thing that anyone can do, no matter who they are, what level of knowledge they might be at, or wherever they are in their career path, take whatever you do know and have a real opinion about it, and share that, and be straightforward. I'm an expert in this and this is what I think, or I am a total novice. The only thing I know is what I read in the readme, but for me it sounds like, right? And have an opinion. Be yourself, be solid in that.
Looking at your journey from writing the Policy Bytes newsletters to keynoting at KubeCon China, what activities or channels created the most meaningful career opportunities for you?
Wow. I think the most meaningful career opportunities that I've had have actually come from my friends that I've made in this space. I've been very fortunate sometimes to make friends on Slack, because I reached out with some sort of curious question, and then after a week of back and forth said, maybe we can just have a call. It would be faster for you to just explain it to me in 5 minutes. And have made some very random friendships that way, as well as meeting people at different conferences and events and actually getting to know them as human beings, not just what their day job is. There are so many people that love to talk about their job at conferences because their families don't understand what it is that they do. They don't have anyone else to discuss it with, but they also have a whole nother life and they enjoy talking about that. When you can connect with people in person, whether it's on a Slack message that turns into a coffee call weekly or at an actual conference, they become your friends, and those people then want to do things with you, like give talks. And that's actually how my keynote happened was because I made friends with Amit de Sosa. We've been friends for a couple of years now, and he said, "Hey, the deadline for KubeCon China is tomorrow. You want to submit something?" And I went, "Sure." And we jumped on a call that was really just to catch up, and came up with a submission off the top of our heads, and ended up enjoying a week in Hong Kong to keynote. So at least for me, that's it.
Can you share what you spoke about in your keynote?
We spoke about crossplane. Everybody's always talking about crossplane. It's the answer to everything, but nobody actually talks about what the question is. And that was the title of our talk. Crossplane is the answer. What's the question? And we discussed all of the different needs of infrastructure as code and the different tools in the CNCF landscape that build into that, and very much tried to help people understand what the question is that Crossplane is trying to answer, and whether it's the right answer for them or not.
Courtney, what's next for you?
KubeCon North America and the first ever KyvernoCon double event. We have a virtual KyvernoCon happening very soon on September 17th. And then we have our inaugural in-person KyvernoCon co-located event at KubeCon North America. So that's what's next for me. And KCD Sophia before that, and a workshop with Buoyant. And the Policy Bytes podcast. There you go. Too much on my what's next for me list.
And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
I am on just about every Kubernetes-oriented Slack, CNCF Slack, Kubernetes Slack. We also have a Kyverno open source community Slack, always as Cortney Nickerson, usually some sort of photo that one of my kids took. So welcome to find me there. You can also find me once in a while on the space previously known as Twitter at Tech Talking Mom.